I don't often make videos on Brexit because I just find it a very toxic subject. It depresses me even thinking about it. But I've seen a video on ITV Facebook link, and I think it offers a few talking points. So there was a pro EU demonstration going on, and the MP Richard Graham was there, and a French woman, a French national, who is according to her, married to a British man. She teaches British children in a local school. This was in Gloucester, in the West Country. Was very upset, very tearful, and she basically berated this MP and said that they have, presumably all politicians have destroyed her life and she's contributed to the country and so on. And she was clearly very upset. So I decided to do a bit of research on this MP. I'm not familiar with the guy. Here's the irony: he voted Remain. And not long ago, there was, I believe she was a Portuguese woman, had a similar outburst in a London demonstration. Now, I'm not trivializing these things. I do think that there are a lot of EU nationals are legitimately concerned about this situation. I have French friends living in the UK, and I know they're concerned. I know there's been situations, for example, where people have had to resubmit paperwork and so on, and I think the government, the Home Office, has a responsibility to not treat them the way the Department of Work and Pensions treats claimants. To not just treat them like numbers, to recognise that they're going to be apprehensive at this time, to give them reassurance and to make it as simplistic as possible. They should not be punished for our disagreements with the EU. Now, having said that, there's a few disclaimers I want to make. I voted Remain, and there are certain Brexiteers who I do think have very jingoistic, narrow mindsets. I've seen the ugly side of Brexit. I've been personally abused by hardline Brexiteers telling me I'm a traitor, etc. Even though I would describe myself as a moderate Remainer. I'm not calling for a second referendum. I'm not taking to the streets demanding another referendum, and I am no fanatical lover of the EU. And yet they've still seen fit to label me a traitor and to abuse me. So I've seen that ugly side from Remainers. Excuse me, from Leavers. I don't have much time for their mentality, and I also have a problem with this lazy attitude that they have every time someone expresses concern. They immediately go to, "Oh, it's Project Fear." I mean, it seems to be the only argument they have these days. As for Nigel Farage, I've no time for the man. I think he's very good at throwing stones at the glass house, but not really taking any responsibility. He's very good at lambasting elected politicians, but he won't take any responsibility himself. Um, and if he isn't busy, sucking up to President Trump, then he's stoking up animosity towards Remainers on LBC. I've no time for the man. And I I think if you look at the language that some Leave leaders use, not least the Prime Minister, it went from saying that the chances of a no deal Brexit are 1 in a million to it's touch and go. So, Johnson is a personification of how dishonest the Leave side has been in many respects. Having said all that, I saw some comments on a group that I was in and I'm frankly considering leaving, called Scientists for the EU. The sort of comments I'm seeing are things like, well, firstly, they're supporting this woman, but even though the fact that Richard Graham is a Remain voting MP. And it's this mentality of all politicians are one and the same. And you get this on both sides. I have a big problem with it. I think it's lazy thinking to not bother looking at someone's individual record and see what side of the argument they're on. Um, Remain MPs have taken a lot of abuse for the positions that they've held. So to be further abused by Remain voting people is just ironic. Um, Yelling in someone's face never wins an argument, no matter how upset you are. And she was on the verge of tears, so she was clearly very upset. But I'm sorry, that just doesn't win arguments. All that does is play into the Leave side's hands. In fact, a lot of them are saying these people are actors, which is nonsense. But I just don't think it wins arguments. I think it does show that people are upset and concerned, but yelling in someone's face just doesn't win arguments. Um, Also, the sort of comments that I was seeing, things like I actually saw one comment and it got likes. Um, we are about to see concentration camps. These Nazi leavers are bringing us to that. Look at the rise of Hitler in Germany. This sort of hyperbole is grotesque. It is absurd. And all it will do is give the Remain side a bad image. And I really get annoyed with my fellow Remainers when they come out with nonsense like that. There may be some racists among the Leave side, I'm sure there is, but to just dismiss everyone, to dismiss Leave leaders as Nazis, that is an incredibly loaded term, and people should not be throwing it around. To say things like we're going to have concentration camps, that is hyperbole. That's sheer hyperbole, and that is where the Leave side actually could legitimize their claim of Project Fear, because that is Project Fear. That is. I don't think every concern about Brexit is Project Fear, but I think saying that we're going to have concentration camps, that is a grotesque. That to me is an insult to people who survived the Holocaust, who survived Srebrenica, who have had actual experience of concentration camps. I've been to a totalitarian state. I know how they work. And as much as we are bitterly divided right now, the idea that we're going to end up as a totalitarian state where minorities are going to be rounded off into concentration camps, people who are saying that need to be ashamed of themselves, quite frankly, because they're scaring people. They're scaring EU nationals who are living here, that that's going to happen. And it's nonsense. So I've been pretty critical of those Brexiteers and Leavers, and I still am, who feel the need to abuse people as traitors, etc., and who just dismiss every concern as, oh well, it's Project Fear or shut up, you lost the referendum. But I also get frustrated with people who voted Remain, and firstly, they seem to have this dewy-eyed blindness to any faults that the EU has. When they wear EU hats and EU flags and so on, and they get this hysterical reaction if you criticize the EU. Oh, well, you must be a fascist. Frankly, the EU as an institution is not a great symbol of democracy. I voted Remain because I felt that I weighed up both arguments and I felt that the uncertainty that this would bring was not worth it. And I think that I've been vindicated. I think that all the Brexit process has done is cause division and uncertainty. But I do think the EU seriously needs to reform. Um, I mean, I've seen French nationals and so on, actually talk down about the British like being ignorant little Englanders because people don't like the EU. But I mean, are you honestly going to say that there isn't French patriotism, that there isn't French nationalism, or Dutch nationalism, or Austrian nationalism, or you name it? So to single Britain out regarding nationalism is a bit unfair. Um, but frankly, the EU isn't a particularly democratic organisation. I think it does need to do a lot more to show that it cares about national sovereignty. And this idea that caring about national sovereignty equates to being a blood and soil nationalist or a racist, all that's going to do is galvanise actual racists because it will play into their hands. So basically, what I'm saying here is I see extremes on both sides. And as someone who voted Remain, I think it's my responsibility to call out the extremes on my side. Those idiots who go around just labeling people racists and Nazis. Get a grip, because all you're doing is adding to the division and animosity. You're smearing people with no evidence. Call call Leave leaders liars, I think there is evidence for that. But to call Boris Johnson a Nazi, really? I feel that's grotesque. This is a prime minister who has brought in an Asian chancellor and an Asian home secretary. To label him a Nazi just because he represents Brexit is absurd.